This is just your cue that we're going to be starting in a few minutes. So grab a beverage, a snack, say hi to a friend, and we're going to be getting settled. In a couple minutes, we'll kick off our program. Thank you. We're going to start this a little differently. If you know me for a while, you know that I'm not only just about advocacy and activism. I always like to remember to practice mindfulness, to take care of our well-being, because that's how we keep this work sustainable. So to get us started, I invite you to join me in a brief grounding exercise to help us arrive fully into this space together. You can keep your eyes open or close them as you prefer. And let's take a couple deep breaths together. And as you bring your attention to this room and our shared time together, I want us to remember, lies are harmful, but even the truth can be unhelpful if it feeds worry and fear. Today, we focus on a different way to know truth. As we hear from George Pappas, I want to invite you into a new mindset. The truth fuels my courage. Can you guys say that out loud with me? Truth fuels my courage. Not my fear, but my courage. May what we learn today propel us into action out of love and courage, not out of fear, out of hate, like some of them want us to live on. We refuse that. My name is Lorena Betts, and I'll be moderating today's conversation with George Pappas. We're going to begin with our land acknowledgement. That is very important. I always say that as we seek to do better, we also must take pause to take time to recognize the part we play into the harmful systems that we're trying to make better. The town of Chelmsford acknowledges that its land upon which the government buildings, town common, and libraries are situated is the traditional and ancestral territory of many diverse indigenous nations. As we strive to honor these peoples, we acknowledge the history of genocide and forced removal from this land, now known as Chelmsford. And we honor the indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we live, work, and learn. This area comprises in part the homelands of the Pawtucket, Pennacook, Abenaki, and their close neighbors, the Massachusetts and Nipmuc peoples. The town of Chelmsford extends our deepest respect to citizens of these nations who lived here and elsewhere today, and to their ancestors who have lived here for generations. And I want to take this a little step further, as my friend Alyssa taught me. As we acknowledge, let us also make a commitment within ourselves to look for ways to support these peoples. We are also grateful to our co-sponsors today, the Peacemakers Network, Chelmsford Connected, and the Chelmsford Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And of course, we want to thank our amazing volunteers from the Peacemakers Network and Chelmsford Connected. And I would like them to stand up or raise their hands and invite you to give a round of applause because they helped make today happen. Also, thank you to Chelmsford TV for recording today, and for amazing Ash, who is helping us with our Facebook Live. Thank you. And now, to our community building time, which is the foundation to which we build our work. We are not doing this alone, and we need that reminder constantly. And although we gather today to learn, the priority is to learn upon a foundation of relationship building. Community and mutual care is what's going to help us to achieve the things that we're trying to strive for. So please turn to someone you don't know, introduce yourself, and in 1 minute each, answer. And this is important. How do I plan to contribute to building the kind of community I want to live on? This question takes ownership. We're not only talking about the problem, but the solution. What are we building? So, how do I plan to contribute to building the kind of community I want to live on? So let's get started. All right. And remember, everyone, these moments of connection are how we start to shape the communities we say we want. So as we wrap this moment up, I want to invite some of you who are sitting far apart, if you could kind of come closer to each other, especially from the back, so folks that arrive a little later can be able to sit right there, please, and thank you. Now, it is my great honor to introduce Judge George Pappas. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina, to Greek immigrant parents, but raised in New York City, George Pappas is a fired immigration judge. Yes, he owns up to that, and he gave me that word. Out of the Boston, Chelmsford, Massachusetts immigration courts, and an attorney now based in Asheville, North Carolina, representing clients in U.S. immigration law, criminal law, family law, and civil rights litigation nationwide. Dr. Pappas is also admitted to practice law in Massachusetts and North Carolina and U.S. federal courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court. He represents clients on immigration before the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, appeals before the Board of Immigration Appeals, the Administrative Office of Appeals, and U.S. federal courts. Mr. Pappas is also a member of the Cherokee Supreme Court, Eastern Band. In addition to practicing law, since 2006, Dr. Pappas has researched and written his book, The Literary and Legal Genealogy of Native American Dispossession, the Marshall Trilogy Cases, 1823-1832, published by the Francis and Taylor Group, explaining how the U.S. Supreme Court blurred the distinction between literature and law, especially colonial literature, to dispossess Native Americans of their land. Between 2002 and, 2002 and 2023, Dr. Pappas was the executive director of the International Center for Legal Studies, ICLS, and also the principal owner of his law firm. Mr. Pappas holds degrees in economics and law from the London School of Economics and Political Science, the Delaware Law School, Widener University, and Birkbeck School of Law, University of London. Dr. Pappas also earned his PhD in philosophy from Birkbeck College School of Law, University of London. Dr. Pappas and his very talented wife, Ellen, live in Asheville, North Carolina. They have 2 children, Natalie and Alexander. Please join me in welcoming Judge George Pappas.
Are we mic'd up? Yes, okay, good.
Hi, Judge. We're good? Thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I look forward to it.
Yes, so let's get started. Can you walk us through the events? I'm sorry, this is the wrong paper, pardon. Got it. We don't want to jump parts of the story. It's very important. Okay. Why did you decide to become an immigration judge?
It's a good question. And that's what they asked me when I applied to be an immigration judge. And my answer was, you need me. I don't need you. I had 20 years of experience representing clients in immigration matters, and I saw the huge backlog that the United States is dealing with immigration cases. And I said, guys, I'm here to give you some help, all right? I don't need to be trained. I can hit the ground running. A lot of other judges don't have an immigration background, so their learning curve is a lot steeper. Mine was pretty flat. So I was able to start hearing cases as soon as I arrived in Boston. So I wanted to serve. I was coming out of the private sector. I had 40 years of experience doing other things other than being a judge. 20 years import-export, 20 years running a law school that we founded, the International Center for Legal Studies. We were teaching University of London students all around the world for 21 years. Plus, I ran a law firm for 20 years. So I brought all of that experience to the bench. And I was very happy that they thought I could do the job. And so that's the answer to your question.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that call. Yes. But what were your first impressions in the role? As you transitioned from serving in these other capacities and became an immigration judge, what were your first impressions?
Well, unlike a lot of other judges, remember, I was an attorney for 20 years. So for the first time, I could see the attorneys appearing in front of me, and I knew who did their job, who prepped, and who didn't. And so I was in their shoes for 20 years. I also represented immigration clients for 20 years. So I have huge empathy for their life stories, their experiences. So I brought that to the bench. What changed dramatically for me, for the first time, I had to control an environment to provide due process and a fair hearing. I can't take sides. Politics can't become part of what I'm doing. And I can tell you, I kept politics out of my courtroom. I always looked at the facts, the demeanor of the people in the courtroom, and of course the law to make a decision. So for me, the big change was becoming a neutral umpire and trying to control the parameters of testimony, of evidence. And one thing I really did that I did not see on the bench when I was an attorney, I came from a very hostile part of the United States, the Southeast, between Atlanta and Charlotte. The denial rate for, say, asylum is over 95%. You might as well just forget about applying for asylum in those areas. And the judges were, in my view, unprofessional and hostile. So I saw what not to do. And so when I came here, I wanted all parties to realize that they're going to get respect. I'm going to listen to their arguments, and I'm going to make a decision. And when I make a decision, you're going to know why. I'll dictate the decision in open court. It takes about 30 to 40 minutes. I will explain to the immigrant, the respondent, if we grant, let's say, relief or asylum, I'll make sure that that respondent understands that both the attorney for the Department of Homeland Security and the attorney for the respondent helped me discover the truth. Both attorneys did their jobs. And I went out of my way to compliment both attorneys. This is not a fight. This is not a boxing match. We're trying to discover the truth. And when attorneys do that for me, it makes my job easier, much easier. So that was one of the big changes, trying to develop a fair courtroom, doing it with dignity, with empathy, and consistent with the law. That I didn't do in private practice. That I did as a judge, and I'm proud that I went through that experience. There you go.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure everyone appreciated your perspective coming from a different, from being a lawyer, an attorney, and being a judge, and being able to empathize with the people on the other side while still keeping your professionalism. And so, but looking back from when you started and to most recent times, how would you describe the job today compared to when you began?
Well, the job today is totally different from 2 years ago. We now have from a judge's perspective, a hostile environment. Politics is now overshadowing the judicial process in immigration court. Politics is pressuring judges to do certain things that they wouldn't normally do. Fear has entered the courtroom. We're not talking about the immigrants, we're talking about the judges and the clerks. Since January 20th, very dark clouds have overshadowed the court system nationwide for all immigration courts, especially here in Chelmsford. Hostile interference, attack on due process, attack on judges, attack on fairness. Now, these are the challenges that judges are facing. External pressure that shouldn't be there in the first place. So the hostility of the environment is not conducive to anyone's benefit. Judges need to be left alone to hear both sides of the case. We shouldn't have to worry about somebody overshadowing us, making sure that we do certain things or rule in a certain way. And we'll get into that later on. So compared to when I started 2 years ago, when we had a very positive environment in the court, I started at the Boston court. That's where I started before I came to Chelmsford. Everybody, I can tell you the staff in Boston and in Chelmsford, first rate. The one thing I did see, which hasn't changed, is the immense respect I have for public federal workers. They come in, excuse me, they come in every day, they do their job, despite all the politics I just alluded to. Without them, we can't do our job. If I asked my clerk to do something, he did it, gladly. He also laughed at my bad jokes, but that's besides the point. But I have such high respect for the commitment that federal workers make. And to see before my eyes, over 60,000 have been fired in the last 6 months and counting, is just abhorrent, the way they've been treated and the way I was treated. We'll get into that later on. So the atmosphere has changed 360 degrees from where it was 2 years ago in the courthouse.
Yes, and I can only imagine how difficult it is as when you started your commitment to being impartial and with the people that you're working with from the bench and with the attorneys, but now also getting that pressure from the people above you. And you mentioned the pressures and the challenges. What were the ones that stand out to you the most?
Well, let me give you an example of political interference with being an immigration judge right here in Chelmsford with me. I'm Exhibit A. I was pressured by my assistant chief judge, and he was pressured further up the line by the Department of Justice and then the White House to grant motions to dismiss. Let me explain to you why this is critical. About a month ago, ICE officers started to enter and roam our courthouse. They were waiting to arrest immigrants as they came out of the courtroom. They already had a target of who they wanted. In order for those targets to be eligible to be arrested at the time, the court had to grant a motion to dismiss. So the attorney for the Department of Homeland Security would stand up and say, "Judge, we move to dismiss the case." Well, of course, I'm going to ask the Department of Homeland Security, what's the reasoning? You just can't ask me to grant a motion without telling me why. They would give me their reasons. But then, of course, I have to give the immigrant that responded an opportunity to understand what the motion means. And I would explain to the immigrant, if we grant a motion to dismiss, your case will no longer be in immigration court. You won't have legal status. You'll be in limbo. And you could be arrested, either in the courthouse or somewhere else. There's nothing to stop the government from seizing you during your unlawful status. And so I denied these motions for various reasons. One, I'm not going to be told how to rule. That's like a default. Do not tell me how to rule. Two, many of these folks had applications for asylum already on file. Well, remember, the government filed charges against them with the court. So the court has control. As an immigration judge, I have jurisdiction to decide what to do with the immigrant, not the Department of Homeland Security or the White House. If I see an application for asylum already on file, my job, if the immigrant wants to pursue that application, is to make sure they get their day in court, that they have a hearing. So if the application was filed, and if other things like pleadings were taken, I would schedule their final hearing, which is now over 2 years out. But I would not grant a motion to dismiss, because if I did that, as soon as I grant the motion to dismiss, as soon as that immigrant walks out of the courtroom, ICE is waiting for them to cuff them, arrest them, put them in what's called expedited removal, which means I can send you to an airplane and off you go. And we don't know where they're going to be shipped to. South Sudan, El Salvador, Who knows? A gulag in Siberia? We don't know where they're going to go. Hold on, ma'am. I'll get to your question. So the consequences of granting that motion were intense, catastrophic for the immigrant. What I just explained to you is an attempt by the Department of Justice to influence how I would rule. My job is to be fair and neutral, not biased. What was happening here is the Department of Justice was aligning with the Department of Homeland Security to deport these people. I did not follow that pressure because it was inconsistent with the law. It was inconsistent with everything they taught us and advised us to promote fairness and due process. That is an explosive piece of evidence, ladies and gentlemen. What you're hearing from is a judge that was pressured to increase the odds that somebody could be deported. If we don't think that's a violation of due process, I don't know what it is. So that was probably the most egregious thing they did.
Thank you, Judge. I don't know about you guys, but my watch just warned me that my heart rate went up. This is serious. This is very serious. Thank you for speaking up and for telling us the truth, Judge. You told us many of the procedures and the ways they are eliminating due process, practically speaking. Now, looking back, we all know that since January 20th, as you mentioned, a dark cloud that's been over us. So if we kind of could see it coming. And I wonder if you, as a judge, even before you saw these facts happening before you, people asking you to do those things, could you sense, or maybe did you fear that this was going to impact your work when you saw, the new president coming into office?
Yes. Within hours of the new administration, within hours of President Trump's inauguration, he fired our entire leadership in Falls Church, Virginia. The acting director of the Executive Office of Immigration Review fired. The immigration chief judge out of Falls Church, Virginia, fired. The general counsel for all of the Executive Office of Immigration Review fired, and another leadership position fired. So the entire leadership was fired within hours. We knew there would be changes with new administrations. We didn't think it would happen so quickly, so abruptly, but they were on a target list. So that was the first ominous sign that change was on the way. Within 2 to 3 weeks of that event, 13 judges were fired en masse across the United States, one in Chelmsford, without cause, no reason. Summarily dismissed. Under Article 2, we have the right to terminate or fire you, pack your bags up, bring everything at the end of the day. Your last day is X. That's it. I got the same message. All of us did. So the next dark cloud was the firing en masse of immigration judges. Now, there's been changes or firings of judges in the past, but not to this scale. And we had just started. We didn't finish. That was the start. Then we had another round of firings in April of 2025. We had a probationary class. When you become a judge, you're under what's called a 2-year probationary period. And unless there's a complaint against you or unless you've done something unprofessional, you'll be converted to a full-time judge. Do your job and you'll be fine. That class was finished with their 2-year probation in April of this year. We had 4 judges to be converted to full-time status. 3 of the 4 were fired. These were 3 excellent judges. Impeccable backgrounds, fired. The one that wasn't fired was formerly an attorney with the Department of Homeland Security. So hold on to that thought. Well, the alarm bells are going off in the courthouse, morale is plummeting, and yet me and other judges have to prepare for cases every day. I mean, the default position for a judge is already stressful. We're handling an avalanche of cases every day, and you have to prepare for those cases, not in 5 minutes, not in 10. You've got to put the work in. I never went into a case and I didn't know what the issues were, which is why I was able to render decisions most of the time on the spot. So you already had this baseline of stress just handling the workload. But around you now you start seeing your colleagues that are being fired for no reason at all, colleagues that are fully qualified, trained, vetted We're all vetted by the FBI. There's background checks. We just don't send a resume in and they hire us. We go through a complete vetting process. And so resignations now kicked in from other judges that weren't fired. They didn't want to have any part of this toxic environment. So we had about 3 or 4 judges resign and said, I'm out of here. This is the worst thing I've ever done. Then in June, we had another judge fired. A judge that spent 20 years in the Navy as a judge. 20 years service. A veteran. We didn't think he would be fired. He was fired. This poor man came out of the Navy, relocated his family from being on duty in Europe, moved to New Hampshire, bought a house, put his kids in school, did his job every day. He was with me. Great judge. And they fired him for no reason at all. They fired him. So, in terms of my situation, certainly I was expecting to be fired. This was not going to be a shock to me. The chances of me being retained were very, very small. So people say, why didn't you resign? No. I doubled down. I'm going to stay until the end. As long as I'm on the bench and I can do some good, I'm staying put. I am not being pressured out of here. Then we get to my class, my group, June 11th. 17 of us were fired nationwide on that day, then another 2 Mondays, so that was 19. We all got the same 1-paragraph letter from the director. And my assistant chief judge didn't even have the decency to speak to any of us who were let go, not only with me, but with the previous judges. But I thought I had the decency to write back to him and to the director of EOIR. And I said to them, Judge, as you know, a lot of us were let go today. We made huge sacrifices to serve. I'm really sorry you didn't appreciate our service. Not even a thank you. Sincerely, George Pappas, immigration judge. That was my parting message to the administration that fired us. Of course, they never replied. So the dark clouds were there, but as bad as that sounds, the dark clouds intensified with other things that were happening at the Executive Office of Immigration Review. As soon as the inauguration kicked in, policy memos started to be written by the director of the Executive Office of Immigration Review. When you have a new administration, you're going to expect changes. Changes in policy happens all the time. What you don't expect is language that looks in the rearview mirror and just throws mud at all the previous people in management, calling them unethical, illegal, unprofessional, and other horrible terms that were totally unnecessary. So you had this very hostile theme permeating through all the memos that the judges were reading nationwide. Well, that's not a warm and fuzzy thing to read. That's a very hostile thing to read. Then another thing stopped. Every time we asked for guidance as to which way we should be handling our docket, we never got a written reply. The reply was, let's talk about it. And you get on the phone or on Teams, and the answer was, be careful, the environment has changed. Wow, that was our guideline. Be careful, the environment has changed. In other words, if you don't want to get knocked off, be careful. Well, that's not a way to run a court, but that's what's in place today. So, fear through firings, arbitrarily, unfairly, fear through hostile memos, fear through lack of communication, and then fear by telling judges how to rule in a certain way. This is the vortex that we had to judge within. I withstood it until the end. I started calling my court the Chelmsford Titanic.
Oh my goodness.
And I was determined to be there at the very end. I was just looking for someone to hug on the way down. But I stayed until the end. And there are a few of us that are speaking out, and a lot of them are afraid, especially the ones that are in place right now. There's no way they're going to speak. Did you know that judges have a gag order? We're not allowed to speak in public at all. We cannot freely speak. There's a lawsuit by our union to stop that harassment of judges being able to speak in front of an audience, like right here. So, not a very nice place to work in right now. And it makes it real tough to promote due process and fairness. And now, if you're an attorney representing clients in Chelmsford or in Boston, It's rough. You're going to tell your client, you may have to wait 3 years, maybe more, before your case is heard. Two, we don't know what kind of judges you're going to get. They're being pressured to rule in a certain way. Are we going to get a fair hearing? These are all bad things. So as attorneys, you need to lower expectations to the ground. Otherwise, you're going to pay the price. You got to be really careful. So this is the black cloud that emerged after January 20th, and it's in place right now.
Yes, and I just want to highlight, because for us as the public and as the community, we have been experiencing the stress, the pressure, the fear, but we are now seeing that it goes in different levels of power. Is in the community, is in the courts, and I'm sure it's in other places. And now I want to move us toward making those connections. What does your experience reflect broader changes in immigration courts?
I'm not clear about the question. Well,
So
broader changes?
we've seen the changes happening here, and I'm trying to move us now into connecting this to broader changes and even beyond the courts.
Okay.
Does it stay there? Is it just a change in due process here? I mean, that's already big enough and it's bad enough. But I was wondering if you have been seeing the connections with other areas.
This is a really important question. Connecting the dots. The assault on judges, the assault on immigration courts is part and parcel of a much broader assault on our institutions. There's a fundamental issue or question that's being discussed by the administration as to who a real American is. Who is a real American has become the ideological linchpin of this administration. And the answers to that question affect immigration courts, it affects the media, it affects universities, education, arts, and so many other institutions. The problem we're facing today is that we have an administration that believes that you can only be an American if you have lineage in the United States. You cannot be American because you believe in the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. That doesn't count. That's not enough to glue us as a nation. So unless you've got lineage that goes back generations, maybe you have ancestors that were in the American Civil War or the American Revolution. According to this ideology, you have a greater claim to being American. In fact, you are the core of what an American is. So yes, if we have that core and it's preserved and given that privileged place, we can still accept immigrants on the periphery, but not too many immigrants, because too many immigrants are going to dilute the core of what we consider to be real American. This is not abstract. This is Vice President J.D. Vance promoting this around the country. Multiculturalism, diversity, is a threat to the American core that this administration believes needs to be protected. So how do they protect this American core? Well, obviously, let's gum up the immigration courts, because we don't want them to be giving out grants for asylum or green cards. That's going to bring in more non-core immigrants into the country. Let's dismantle the courts. Let's gum it up. Let's fire judges. And if we replace them, we need yes people to deny at our will the way we want to run the courts. That's one level of attack. Where else is this American definition being used to attack institutions? The media. Look who's sold out already on the media. CBS, ABC. Trump sues. They pay off to keep everything quiet. Where else are we being attacked to attack our liberalism, our diversity, our multiculturalism? Universities. The most insidious attack on universities is using the excuse of anti-Semitism to attack universities and to make them pay millions of dollars in fines, to hold up millions, billions in funding. It's got nothing to do with anti-Semitism. The agenda is to dismantle what they perceive to be as a liberal educational universe they consider liberal education bad. Liberal education promotes diversity, multiculturalism. How else are they attacking what a real American is? The DEI. As soon as they came into power, diversity, equity, those programs were immediately dismantled. We were warned as judges, if you see anybody promoting diversity and equity at the Department of Justice, you are required to report them. This was our job. So you see a much broader assault on the institutions that not only promote multiculturalism, diversity, but also immigration. Legal immigration. We're not talking about undocumented folks. We're talking about legal immigration. It's far more difficult now. You have no assurance that when you go for a legal interview at USCIS for your green card, that you won't be arrested. The fear factor is huge. If you're coming from Australia as a tourist, they're putting you in detention for 2 to 3 weeks because they see something in your background. Tourism has plummeted. People are afraid to come into the United States. So the attack on immigration courts is part and parcel of a much broader attack on the institutions that traditionally glue us together as a society. We are under attack right now. The alarm bells are going off. This is not a normal time. And I'm here to tell you that action is going to be required to save this country. You're seeing $170 billion that have been approved by Congress a few days ago that are going to go to enforcement to the Department of Homeland Security, $170 billion. So all of this money is going to enforcement. At the same time, protections for justice are being undermined. So we're going to become a society that has all this police state apparatus and no justice. If there's no justice and you have enforcement, you have an authoritarian government, an authoritarian country. We are one step away from losing our civil liberties. If a 9/11 were to occur tomorrow, God forbid, your civil rights would be suspended, arbitrary arrest could be sanctioned. If you're perceived to be an enemy, you'll be arrested for national security reasons. Bank accounts, we're going to limit how much you take out. Passports, we're putting a block on that. You can't leave the country. Think of what could happen by one event under this administration. So the alarm bells are going off. I'm just exhibit A of what's already happening. Firing judges. They fired the individual yesterday who reports on the economic statistics. The president didn't like the economic results. Let's fire the messenger. That's exactly what happened. So you see it before your eyes, but there's a broader agenda here, and that's what I was trying to explain to everyone here. Connect the dots. The issue is what J.D. Vance is advancing on behalf of the administration, that real Americans are ones that have lineage in this country and history. We cannot be a nation if we believe in the principles of the Declaration of Independence. That's not going to glue us as a country. A country can only be glued together if there's family, if there's a clan, if there's a tribe, and amongst the tribes, a nation. Notice all of that is lineage. That glue, that cohesion, is not because of the ideals that people come here for. The mistake of that ideology is that when we do have crises here, like 9/11, Pearl Harbor, people unify. They come together, all races, everybody. It proves that multiculturalism can be as unified as any other country. We've done better in terms of economic progress than any country on the planet. You have states like New York and California that have over 15% of immigrants. Those two states contribute more to the federal budget than other states. They're not doing too bad. Multiculturalism works in these two big states. Multiculturalism is not the problem. It is the essence of what makes this country different and great. We have to always be a country in progress, evolving. That's the key to our success, evolving. If we go back to a system that defines us based upon our history, we're never going to change. And we're going to have a hierarchy of who's an American. I'm the premier American because I have ancestors from the American Revolution. Or you're a recent one that just came off the plane from Cambodia. Get to the back of the line. That's where this is heading. And that agenda is what's fueling the assault on our institutions. Now you can connect the dots.
Yes, thank you. That is scary. Just a quick pause. I just want to remind you guys, we do have cards in the back if you want to write down your questions. We will be taking a few questions soon. Our volunteers will get your cards when we're ready. But if you do want to ask a question, please write down on the card. And as we move forward, you've touched on the fact that this is all connected. And we started this conversation talking about immigrants and immigration courts. And when we talk about collective action to combat what we're seeing, this is not just about immigrants fighting for immigrants. We need everyone here and elsewhere to understand that this is a collective problem. It affects everybody. And when we think about that collective problem, I've seen something that really helps people to understand that, which is the Constitution. So how do these issues connect to the constitutional rights for everyone, not just immigrants?
Unfortunately, American citizens are seeing their civil liberties violated today. We hear about ICE arresting immigrants on the street. We see ICE agents masked without identification. We see the fear that's associated with that. And many people will say, well, those are immigrants. They're illegal. It's not my problem. Well, it is their problem because they're arresting American citizens without due process. You have American citizens today that are being arrested without probable cause, even though they can show identification of who they are. They're still being arrested. The trampling of our civil liberties is already started. As I said earlier, if there, God forbid, if there's an emergency, just a perception that you are a radical, an enemy of the state, is enough to arrest you and to keep you in jail indefinitely. If you remember, one of the president's advisors, Stephen Miller, sat in front of the press and said the president has the right to suspend habeas corpus. That is like so wrong constitutionally that he can just say that as if he's creating new constitutional law. No, the president does not have the right to do that unless you have something like a civil war. That's different. It's been invoked 2 or 3 times, that's it. Short of a major emergency, the president has no right to suspend habeas corpus. That's when you're arrested and you have the right to be brought in front of a judge to explain the charges against you. And the administration is saying, well, we can do away with that right. And it's not even a state of emergency. So the fear factor for American citizens is real. You'll be protesting on the street. You'll be picked up as they were in Los Angeles based upon your skin color, your race. Up until 2 days ago, they were doing that in Los Angeles. Finally, the federal court stepped in and said, no, you can't do that. But they were doing it. So Americans, U.S. citizens, need to understand this is not an immigration threat or problem. Our civil liberties are on the line here. And if we can protect due process for immigrants, you're going to protect due process for yourselves and fellow citizens. We are at the precipice of a catastrophe in terms of our civil liberties, and we have to be vigilant and be aware of the threats and protect them as vigorously as possible. Talk to your legislators, talk to your governor, talk to your representatives in Congress. They have to speak with one voice, especially with ICE. You cannot arrest any more people with a mask on. Police have been arresting people for decades with no mask. They wear uniforms. What gives ICE the right to put a mask on and not identify themselves and pick somebody off the street in broad daylight? It is dangerous. It is not an excuse to put on the mask and say, well, our agents fear for their life. They won't fear for their life if they're doing their job in an open way. Doing it with a mask creates fear, and someone's going to get killed, whether an ICE agent or a citizen. That's got to stop. That's some short-term action that you can take now statewide, is to stop ICE from coming into Massachusetts and arresting people with a mask on. That's got to stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Yes, and you've touched on what I was going to ask you next, which is to expand more about the risks if these current trends continue, which we do see continuing. And what else can the community do to combat this? You very specifically just told us now to ask our representatives, our elected officials, and which we've been talking about, right? To not have ICE speak up our neighbors, our friends on the street wearing masks. We're horrified about that. So we're definitely going to take that and make it into action. But what are some other things we can continue to do to fight back? And what are the stakes if we don't?
Well, if you don't fight back, it's a good question. If you don't fight back, you risk your own freedom, your own civil liberties, your own freedom to live in this country. It won't be a democracy anymore. That's where this can go. And that dark endpoint is not a far-fetched environment. We're very close to it right now. But prior to getting to that dark place, one, embrace all people that live in your community. I didn't say citizens, I said people. The people that pay taxes, the people that raise families, the people that have jobs, the people that obey everyday laws. Bring them into the community, embrace them, and become one. Two, everybody that can vote obviously is going to have to get out there and vote. Three, form committees to watch your community. See what's happening around your community. Have networks set up so people can be communicated and contacted immediately. That's happening in LA. One of the silver linings with LA is when the president brought in the National Guard against the governor's wishes, and he brought in the military, the resistance from the LA communities began to coalesce. They started to develop watch committees. They became tighter, closer. Yes, they were living in fear, but they also became more unified. Preemptively, you can do that here. Become even more unified. Also work with attorneys in Massachusetts for help on the law. There are attorney organizations in Massachusetts, like the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Communicate with them, get some professional advice as to what you can do. If you fear being arrested because you're just putting up a sign on your lawn or you're going to a protest, make sure you've contacted an attorney beforehand in case something happens to you. You have an attorney ready to protect you. Maybe they have experience in criminal defense. The key thing is to protect yourself as you're going out into the community to voice your concern. The voice cannot be smothered, but you also have to be real and protect your civil liberties. So coalesce together as a community, obviously get the vote out, but speak to your representatives so the whole state can speak with one voice. Speak to the media. Control the narrative. There are a lot of people out there that disagree with everything I say, and that's okay. That's what this country's about. But there's a whole lot of other people that are still trying to make up their minds. You're not going to change people that have already made up their minds. If they're viscerally committed to a position, you're not going to have an argument with them. They're not going to listen. Don't waste your time. Reach the people that are truly listening and try to advance your narrative and what the risks are. If you're silent, you lose. Look what happened in the last election. A lot of silence. So there's so much that you can do. Just being here is remarkable. So this is a great start. So that's what you can actually do.
Thank you. Yes, what I hear, it's something that we've been trying to foster here, which is this grassroots way of organizing and this mutual care way of thinking. When we start these events and I ask people to talk to each other, it's because that's what we're trying to build. It's not just about reaching up to the people on top and asking, help us, but it's also building the power right here and right now. And an example, look around you in this room. This event was organized in less than a week, and this is community power. And when we look at the problem, we think of something to fear, and it is important for us to be informed about the problem. But when we look at each other, we find the courage and the love to act and to think about what we are building. So thank you so much, Judge, for reminding us today. Yes, there is a big, big problem. But yes, we do have each other, and the power really rests here. And even when we think about our elected officials, and I do want to thank Senator Mike Barrett for being here today, and I hope I'm not forgetting. I also want to thank an Acton member of the Acton Select Board also for being here today. This is about us partnering and remembering that although we have different roles, we are in this together. So I just hope that this encourages you today, and we will now move to our section on asking questions, and I would like to invite my friend Michelle Tang to be up here to ask the questions to the judge. I think right now they're selecting. I do apologize, we will not be able to get to all your questions, but we'll make sure to get to most of them. And with that, I welcome my friend Michelle.
All right, I was trying to kind of look through the questions. There's definitely some similarities in a lot of these questions. So I apologize if we don't get verbatim to everyone's questions, but we'll definitely hit on all the topics that were asked, I believe. The biggest one you already touched on was there was a lot of people asking, like, what are the actions that we can take right now? And so I think you touched on that pretty well. Anything else you can think of to add, or kind of immediate things that we can be doing? You walk out of this room and we want to feel like we're making a difference at the moment.
I mean, that question could be a whole lecture and a whole discussion, but there's one thing I do want to leave you with. It's called the narrative. If someone controls the narrative, they're 90% of the way to where they want to go. The narrative here is who is a real American. Focus on that. What makes America a nation? If you lose that narrative, the game's over. And you can build from that narrative. Because once you build that structure of who a real American is and what glues us together as a society, I think you'll become a much more powerful organization and movement in terms of controlling the narrative. The other side is controlling that narrative right now. It's seeping in. They're putting a lot of pressure that you can only be American if you have lineage. As J.D. Vance told his wife, honey, when you marry me, you get two things, according to J.D. Vance. You get my dirt from my ancestors in Kentucky and $120,000 in debt. That was what he did on his proposal day. He focused on the dirt, the lineage. That's not what makes America. So control the narrative.
Thank you. There was a question in here. Someone was asking if you could explain a little bit more in detail about what it means for a case to be dismissed and kind of why, like, kind of really just the technical terms around that.
Sure. Any party, the respondent's attorney, the respondent, the immigrant, can always say to the court, I request that you dismiss my case. The government attorney can do the same thing. The immigrants sometimes say, I move for you to terminate my case. Anybody can ask that. Of course, in asking that, you have to explain why the court should dismiss the case. If the case is dismissed, the immigrant is no longer in what we call proceedings. They are no longer in immigration court. Their case is closed. They're not given any legal status. It just means that they're not being actively pursued by the court to decide whether they stay or go. Their case is out. Of course, the government has the right to refile what is called a notice to appear. We always grant, whether it's a request for termination or dismiss, it's always with what we call without prejudice. So if the government ever wishes to come back later on to refile charges against that person, they have the right to do that. You know, the person may have a case dismissed and they commit a crime. Well, the government's going to come back and push in those charges again. But what it means is that in the interim, the individual is no longer in immigration court proceedings. They have no legal status. However, they can apply for work authorization. Doesn't mean they'll be approved because their removal has been deferred temporarily. So they may apply for employment authorization. And if they do, they get a Social Security number, they can pay taxes. And being able to work legally does not give you any legal status per se. You're still removable, but you're allowed to work legally. Remember, you don't get a green card, you're not a resident, you certainly don't get citizenship, but you're allowed to work. And that's something. It's not foolproof protection against being deported, but the chances of you being deported traditionally means if you had an employment card, Nobody's going to bother you. So that's the best way I can give you a layman's explanation of what it does.
Thank you. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. There were a few kind of around this topic. Were you pressured, obviously you mentioned you were pressured to dismiss cases, but was there also pressure to deny immigration relief or lower your grant rate, or was really the pressure only about the motion to dismiss?
Oh, there's other pressures. The insidious way that pressure is exacted from above is not noticed by everybody, including many judges. I'll give you an example of the insidious way. How many have read 1984, George Orwell? Good. The Orwellian world is alive and well, especially in immigration court land. Here's how it works. On June 27th, a policy memo was sent to all immigration judges across the United States. And the policy memo said, some of you are bad. Some of you are bad judges because we see that you're making decisions in a biased way. And if you continue to do that, you need to get a new career or we're going to fire you. That's what the memo, in sum, said. And they said it because in the memo, they promoted the fact, we're here to promote fair hearings and due process, and you bad apples are not helping by being biased. Well, what's so insidious about this? On the surface, it looks really nice. It's not nice. It's a form of pressure. How many of you have read Jeremy Bentham and Utilitarianism? All right, we got a few. Jeremy Bentham was the founder of utilitarianism in England in the 1820s. And he developed a prison system that's in use today. The prison system has a vertical column where the guards stand watch. Around this vertical column are all the jail cells that are open and exposed. And everybody in that jail cell never really knows if they're being watched. So to be safe, they assume they are always being watched. Now go to this memo. It's the same principle. Well, you get this memo as a judge. Are they talking about me? Did I write my decision in a way that looks biased? Am I going to be fired? Now they're second-guessing themselves where they don't need to second-guess themselves. That's how it interferes with judicial neutrality. It's an insidious way of pressuring judges, masquerading as due process. Not many people picked up on this. I did. That's one example. I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah.
This one's a little bit open-ended, but it says, is it possible for U.S. citizens to file a class action suit against the current administration? I think there's probably many things that we could want to do that for. But.
Well, to file a suit, as lawyers will tell you, you need to have standing that you are being affected in a certain way. Of course you can file a suit against the government, but you have to have standing. You have to show that the controversy relates to you personally. And although the Supreme Court in the last 2 to 3 weeks has made it very difficult for federal district courts now to issue nationwide injunctions, it hasn't eliminated the ability for lawsuits to be registered as a class, but it takes additional steps. It makes it harder. So in theory, yeah, you can file a complaint against the government, but you have to have standing. You have to show how the controversy affects you directly and how other members that you may want to include will also be affected. So start with that answer.
All right, jumping around a little bit. How can we pressure the sheriff's offices to stop the masks used by ICE agents? I know you mentioned that a little bit, but what can we be doing?
That's a good question, and it's a nationwide question. I cannot tell you, since January 20th, how many local counties across the United States have adopted what's called a 287G agreement with ICE. They have volunteered to become a force multiplier. Local sheriff's departments have volunteered now to work with ICE and to be trained by ICE so ICE can expand their reach. What's interesting, though, if they're part of the 287G, at least they're arresting people without a mask. At least they have a hat on, a badge, you know who they are. So that's not bad. What Massachusetts needs to do through the legislature is to tell counties, sheriffs, we don't think it's appropriate under legislation that you should be involved in federal immigration enforcement. Let the feds take care of that. New York has said, look, we're not going to interfere, but we're not going to help you either. So leave it at that. Of course, the big problem with Mayor Adams and the Department of Justice and the whole controversy surrounding whistleblowers there was that the administration was trying to force New York City to help ICE jail immigrants. And in order for charges to be dropped against Mayor Adams, he agreed to do that. That's another problem. Bottom line is, if you can work with your legislative representatives to pass legislation that does not compel or obligate sheriff departments to enter into 287G agreements, you will reduce the force multiplier of ICE in your state. You get that force multiplier reduced, there'll be less arrests. However, as I said, they just got $170 billion. They are offering $50,000 sign-in bonuses now to certain agents. They are poaching sheriffs to join ICE with this financial carrot. So it's a turbulent ride right now. But what you can do is put pressure on the state not to agree to 287G programs.
I also saw that there's student loan forgiveness for these folks, which is quite ironic and discount. All right, next question. This is a multi-part question. What is the end game for this administration for the immigration court? Will they rehire their own people or let it implode with backlogs? A follow-up to that is, how do you see the federal courts impacting the ability to protect due process, particularly if these cases end up at the Supreme Court? And I'll leave it there. There's a third one there.
Let's take the first one. Short term, the administration is going to hire new immigration judges eventually that will not look like me. They will not think like me. They will toe the line. That's not good. So short term, you can expect mostly yes men to replace us, or political hacks. Ultimately, I see the administration, as long as they remain in power, to just do away with immigration courts. You remember, President Trump came out in public and said, this due process stuff is going to take 200 years to resolve. I don't like it. I want to bypass it. Well, destroying the courts is one way to do it. Moving immigration matters out of the Department of Justice, say to the Department of Homeland Security, would create immigration officers, probably no more judges. And here's where it gets a little dangerous. They're moving toward creating only a detained docket, people that are in jail. We want to put so much pressure that people will self-deport, or if they're caught and they came in without inspection, we're going to put them in detention, and we're going to say they're mandatorily detained and they're not entitled to a bond. That's happening right now for the first time. Not just people that came in within the last 2 years. They were the priorities for expedited removal. That's gone. Now they're going after everybody who we consider iwi, entered without inspection. Which means, ultimately, the detained docket is going to start filling up. People in detention. But there aren't enough judges to handle all these detained individuals, so what's going to happen? Nobody wants to stay in jail for years. They're going to say, get me out of here. I'm going to self-deport. That's exactly what they want. That's where the immigration courts are going. They're not going to be courts for much longer. The other question you asked is the federal courts. Why don't you repeat that one more time for me?
Yes, it was, how do you see the federal courts impacting the ability to protect due process, particularly if cases end up at the Supreme Court?
Wow. Well, they're the last guardrail that's holding the glue together right now. The federal courts, the courts of appeals, the district courts have done a pretty good job pushing back against a lot of unconstitutional executive actions by the administration. But we have a Supreme Court that's problematic. It's been stacked with Federalist Society lawyers who became judges. You ever hear of abortion and abortion rights? Well, that's gone. There will be other precedents that will be overturned. The issue then is, what kind of civil liberties can we expect from this court? Unions have not fared well. They're not doing too well under this court. I'm not optimistic with what this court will do. I should be really concerned. The thing that really concerns me about the Supreme Court is the lack of ethics. They have no ethical code. Every other court has an ethical code, including our court. Not the Supreme Court. They've been raking in untold millions in gifts from billionaires who appear in front of their court, and they're not recusing themselves. So lack of confidence in the Supreme Court is derived from the financial rewards they're getting from certain interest groups, and that has corrupted the efficacy of the Supreme Court. So not too optimistic about what's going to happen there.
Agreed. Thank you. What can immigration lawyers do to support good judges still on the bench? And my addendum to that is, are there many of those left?
There's so many ways I could answer that question. I think as a baseline, as a lawyer, prep your case really well. Make sure that your client understands what they signed when they signed an affidavit or a declaration. I can't tell you how many times a lawyer will come in, put their client on the stand or under examination, and they start giving different information from their declaration. This is totally unnecessary. Be consistent, prep your client. That gains respect from the judge. It shows you've done your homework. 2, don't file asylum claims that you know are not going to be granted. This is a problem. Not all lawyers do this, but enough of them do. The classic waste of money and abuse, which I look down upon when they're a lawyer, is filing claims for individuals that say borrowing money from a loan shark is a basis for my asylum claim. The loan shark's going to kill me if I go back to this country. That's not an asylum claim. It's been overturned by us countless times. We've been upheld by the Board of Immigration, but they keep coming back. Why are these attorneys bringing these claims back? I'll let you connect the dots there. Doing that reduces the stature of the lawyer, big time. And it's not going to be an isolated stature. The whole courthouse will know this. So they need to stop that. The good news is most attorneys don't do that. So besides bringing legitimate claims into court, besides preparing your client with their own background, their own affidavit or their own declaration, be consistent with requests to continue a case. I have attorneys that constantly ask to continue a case. Then they have the audacity to say, well, I'm only free for these dates. It's like, no, we have a docket here. We're not going to work around your schedule. You're going to work around our schedule. And if you're too busy, you either should be taking the case or you need to get some help. There are things that lawyers can do to improve not only their reputation, their stature in front of the court, and to help their client. Be smart about what you're asking the court to do. Eventually, if the requests are not grounded in real merit, it'll catch up with the lawyer and hurt the immigrant. So do your job well, prepare. If there's any motions, make sure they're grounded. If you need a motion to withdraw, there are many problems between attorneys and clients. Happens all the time. If there's a breakdown in the communication, no problem. But in over 2,400 motions that I have granted, I have not seen one motion to withdraw that has done the following. Not a single attorney, upon motion to withdraw, because of their problems are, and legitimate problems, puts down some other references for the immigrant to contact for representation, maybe legal aid, maybe 2 or 3 other attorneys. In North Carolina, we do that all the time. I didn't see it up here. For me, it's not enough to just say communications broke down. It could be a myriad of reasons, conflicts of interest, and that's legitimate, and I grant most of those. But I'm always perturbed that in that motion, they have not communicated to the immigrant. You can also get help here, even though we're not going to be your lawyer anymore. That would be another way for a lawyer to improve their stature and standing with an immigration judge.
Thank you for that. This one says, does ICE need to have a warrant to enter a church?
You bet. A church is, and the warrant can't be signed by an ICE officer. It's got to be signed by a judicial officer. You don't enter any private property without a judicially signed warrant. And the warrant has to be with specific reasons. What are they looking for? Who are they looking for? If they don't have a warrant and they come in, don't fight with them. You can always toss out the evidence later on. Just remember, judicially signed warrant, not a warrant signed by an ICE officer. Doesn't count.
All right, thank you. This one comes from some of our volunteers from Luce. What advice can you give volunteers from Luce to help immigrants coming to court? What would you like to see us do that we haven't already done?
Well, being there to accompany them is a big benefit, especially now with the fear factor. You cannot prevent ICE in the courthouse from arresting them. If you are, you'll be arrested. You can ask for a judicial warrant. They're not going to probably have one. It's a tough one to call because the risk now for immigrants to enter a court is high. If they don't go to court, an abstention order can be entered, and then there'll be a removal or an abstention order out there that ICE can use to go to their house and arrest them. So they're in a no-win situation here. I think if you know that ICE is around, well, right now with many of the immigration courts in Chelmsford, you can appear by WebEx. So take advantage of that. Appear by WebEx. You can do that both for master hearings and for individual hearings. You're not necessarily required right now to appear in person every time. That would dramatically reduce the fear factor.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't realize that.
Yeah.
So, thank you. This one comes from a state hospital worker in Mass. I work at a state hospital in Massachusetts. In spite of the Mass AG's multiple recommendations on how healthcare facilities should prepare for ICE raids, our state hospitals and facilities will not acknowledge the risks nor possibility. What can a Mass state worker do? Unions are unsure if it's in their scope.
What can they do with what? With ICE entering their hospital?
I think that seems to be what they're asking, or
Judicial warrant.
the same thing as
Yeah.
All right, we have about 4 minutes left. I'm going to look through real quick and just grab something that's a little different from what we've already asked, if there's anything left like that. These are all very similar. This is an interesting one, and I think we've heard this a little bit in the news, but have you seen there being a move to buy citizenship? I think we've seen some of the...
You mean to purchase citizenship?
To purchase citizenship, yes.
Well, an attempt was made by the president for what's called a golden visa. I think that got knocked down. But there was already what they call an EB-5, an investor visa. If you invest $500,000 or so in certain enterprise zones or economic zones in the United States, you can qualify for a green card, not citizenship per se. But there's nothing stopping Congress from passing legislation that would allow that.
I think we might be good. There's definitely a few questions we didn't get to, some very specific ones.
You had a question earlier?
Oh, yeah. Did you write? You wrote it down? Did we get to it? Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
good. We have a question back there.
Okay.
Did everybody hear the question?
I was going to summarize that real
Yeah,
quick, if
go
you
ahead.
don't mind. Yes, that was a great question. So basically what she was asking was, Trump's lineage is also not, in the United States for a very long time. He comes from immigrants, and basically what can we, or who's calling the shots? Because I think we can all see that Trump isn't necessarily always making those decisions. You've mentioned J.D. Vance. What else are you seeing there, and what else can we be doing?
Okay, there is a national conservative movement in the United States. J.D. Vance is part of it. There's also a book, I wish I had the title in front of me, that is the Conservative Foundation for the Ideology that...
The Ezra Klein podcast, right? They could listen to that.
That's it. What was the book they referenced there?
I don't know, but the Ezra Klein podcast available on New York Times podcast.
That Ezra Klein podcast really lays out the J.D. Vance agenda on behalf of the administration that talks about lineage being the basis of what a real American is, the basis of protecting that core in the United States. And of course, what this is an ideological narrative. It's coming from Vance. He's the ideological spokesperson for this creed of what an American is. Trump is not able to articulate this in any way. Steve Miller is the implement policymaker that effectuates ideology into actual action. You may disagree with him, but he's been doing a pretty good job with his blueprint, which is part of 2025 and his nonprofit. But the ideological narrative is coming from J.D. Vance. He's been given that task. And he comes out of a national conservative movement that put together this creed. And there is a book that Vance has used to advance this lineage basis to real nation building. The counter is to say how wrong it is and to show why the United States has been an exception to that narrative. The exception is that the principles that are outlined in our founding documents are in fact the glue that bring people here. People can become United States citizens here. They can't do that in other countries. And the person who said that is Ronald Reagan, not me. So control the narrative on why that ideology that J.D. Vance is promoting is wrong. And use examples of how being tied to the principles of our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, have glued together who we are as a people, and that we are not tied to originalist thought of legal statutory interpretation that was written 250 years ago. Our Constitution is a living and breathing document. It is not an edifice stacked and stuck in a time of 1787. There are many jurists, including many Supreme Court judges, who believe that we can only interpret the Constitution based upon its original intent. Doesn't matter what's happened since. So you have to counter that narrative. People have to speak in different places. They have to write. You can't let that space be abandoned and left unattended. Otherwise, they will occupy the space, and you will be, what's the word? De-Americanized. You will be de-Americanized, or you will be placed lower on the hierarchy of what a real American is. Don't let it happen. There's another question there.
Thank you. We have one. Okay, we have two hands up, and we have a few minutes left, and I do want to save a couple minutes for Senator Mike Barrett to give some remarks. So, Tim, why don't you ask your question?
Is this the J.D. Vance ideology that you're alluding to, basically the white supremacy ideology?
Not quite, although close. The white supremacy is part and parcel of this ideology, but it's not the totality of the ideology. White supremacy is a racist type of trope, but the white supremacist is not going to say, well, only lineage can define what a real American is. But that narrative includes white supremacists. There you go.
Thank you. And Daniel?
Yeah, just real quick to that particular narrative. There's a book from the late Harvard professor Samuel Huntington called Who Are We? And he speaks particularly to that narrative that you're speaking about, of it being what it means to be an American. But my question to you, I wanted to get a little bit more clarity to see if you could speak to the recent removal of sensitive locations, DHS policy that permits ICE to enter into schools, churches, and are these places considered private property, or is there room for them to be interpreted as public spaces of worship, therefore they can enter into those spaces? What we've been told is that there are particular offices that are considered for personnel only where ICE cannot enter into, but the place itself is considered a public venue.
If it's a public venue, not only can they enter it without a warrant, you can be arrested and charged as harboring and interfering.
Right.
So that was a risk that was in place even before Trump with respect to churches and sanctuary cities. And they were assuming that risk. But if it's a pure public place, you're taking a risk that you'll be charged as well, if you're harboring.
Okay, one last question. Thank you. I keep saying one last question, but this is it.
Appreciate it. Judge Pappas, I haven't heard from you this evening any reference to the terms fascist or autocratic. And I'm wondering if you feel as though we're being moved as a society or as a nation into those different forms of government.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to invite all of us again to give a round of applause and a thank you to Judge Pappas for being here with us today. Yes, yes.
Thank you. Very good question.
And thanks to our volunteer and co-lead of Chelmsford Connected, Michelle Tang. Now, before you guys go, I just need you for a few more minutes, and I want to invite Senator Mike Barrett to give us a few remarks.
I'm going to step down.
And then we'll have just a couple of announcements, and we can all go enjoy the rest of our beautiful Sunday.
Ooh, microphone.
Thank you again, Judge Pappas. That was terrific. If you want to scare yourself straight, but in a useful way, do take a look at this book by a man named Yoram Hazony. That's H-A-Z-O-N-Y. Yoram, Y-O-R-A-M. Yoram Hazony wrote a book called The Virtue of Nationalism, and it does seem to have served as the inspiration for J.D. Vance's take, and it's truly a call to action for everyone who believes that the U.S. is a welcoming place to anyone who aspires to our ideals and goes through the process of applying for citizenship. I just, several times, and these are good questions, the question has been asked what the legislature is doing, and Judge Pappas is absolutely right. The legislature can do quite a bit. We can pass a state law here in Massachusetts to prohibit the signing of 287G agreements on the part of... Okay. There are 2 House bills and 2 Senate bills that are currently before the legislature. I'm co-sponsoring them. Several of my colleagues have, but we need more support. We need the support of more state reps talking to the Speaker, more state senators talking to the Senate President, so we can actually move this prohibition against further cooperation with the feds. We've got some good laws in place. We haven't been quiet. But as Trump has unveiled new strategies, we need to be responsive, and that's where we need to be more agile and where we need your help in terms of moving these additional safeguards. And with that, I just want to thank our wonderful leader here, Lorena Betts, for bringing us together.
Thank you. But the most important people for here tonight, you guys. So a round of applause to our community. You keep showing up, and I'm so, so proud of you and so grateful to call this community mine, and it feels like family. And I do want to mention something. We always talk about how we want to be involving and inviting more of the younger generation into these places. So I do want to take some time to acknowledge the younger generation that is present here today. We see you. We got your back. Please come talk to me. We are planning an event for the youth on August 23rd here in Chelmsford, and I want you to be the leading voices as we plan this. Let's walk together. You are part of this movement too, and we want to hear from you. Thank you for being here, and a round of applause for our youth here today. Now, just a few final announcements as we talk about fighting back. One of the things that I always keep in mind is we're not just in our homes fighting back for our immigrant neighbors. We need to actually build relationship with them. It's easy to come up with all the ideas on what we think they need, or I need, or we need. I know there are many immigrants here today. But I want to invite you to join us on August 7th at Kerouac Park in Lowell, Massachusetts, a city that is filled with beautiful, beautiful immigrant community. Let's get to know our immigrant neighbors. Let's ask them, how are you doing? How can I support you? Remember, relationships is the foundation in which we are building this work. Mutual care is at the heart of what we're doing. And with that in mind, I also want to mention some of the indivisible groups that are here present today. We have Indivisible Concord. I am from Indivisible Chelmsford, which we call Chelmsford Connected. But I do want to invite the Indivisible leaders that are here today to please stand up and tell me where you're joining us from today. Indivisible Westford. Indivisible Acton, Greater Acton area. Indivisible Concord. Indivisible at large. So if you do want to start your own indivisible group in your town, if you don't have one already, maybe you talk to our friend here. But yes, if you'd like to, Indivisible First Middlesex. Yes, and we do have some of my friends too who are members of the Chelmsford Democratic Committee. Please stand up, and if you want to get involved in the local Democratic Committee. Yes, Warren is you, and Rebecca, yes. And I'm sure Karen is here too, Susan, yes, all my friends. Yes, so guys, there are many ways to get involved in community, in the work. Please get involved. We'll be here afterwards. We can send you the information on the email list that we got from you guys. So Thursday, August 7th, Immigrant Solidarity event. Michelle, am I forgetting something else? Oh, at 6 p.m. Yeah, and we will follow up, send you an email with all the information for these future events. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you again, Judge Pappas. We wish you the best. Thank you for being so brave and for using your voice for the community. Thank you. Now go network, and if you haven't grabbed a snack, please feel free to do so. The press, if you want to